Welcome back to our discussion on what will be the impact on India of the United States nuking its nuclear deal with Iran. We have been speaking with former ambassador to the WTO, Jayanta Dasgupta, former diplomat and foreign affairs expert Rakesh Sood, and Mark Doe of Wing Fund Financial Group. Well, Mr. Dasgupta, how do you see trade relations emerging from here on? What are the options available to India? Do you think that with China as well being more belligerent, having a more turbulent relation with the United States and having a larger volume of yuan-denominated trade, India's options are a little better than they were before 2015?
I think our prospects would be more or less the same as they were before 2015, because for one thing, we don't have too many banks which do not have an international exposure. So we in fact had only the United Commercial Bank, which did not have that kind of exposure and therefore could be used as a vehicle for our trade with Iran. Now, having said that, the UCO Bank, of course, has opened a representative branch in Iran in the recent past. We can scale up the operations of that bank and we could use that as a means of enhancing our trade. But the point is that, you know, with the sanctions having a large overhang on our relationship and China breathing down our neck in terms of the trade that is there on offer, it would be difficult to make very significant gains in trade from the pre-2015 position.
Okay.
But we were about to enter into negotiations for a PTA, a preferential trade agreement with Iran. That perhaps will have to be put on the back burner now.
Okay. Okay. Well, what about the investment that India has made in Chabahar port, Mr. Sood? That has to be written off?
No, it won't be written off. But what I think the further investments, because Chabahar was intended to serve as a gateway both for Central Asia as well as for Afghanistan. And so therefore there was the additional investment that was needed in terms of the railway linkage up to Zahedan. There was talk of developing, putting up Indian investment, with the help of Indian industry and so on, in the economic zone around Chabahar, including the possibility of an aluminium smelter plant and so on. I think all of those additional investments will probably have to be put on the back burner till there is greater clarity. And incidentally, we don't know what Iran's reaction is going to be, because if you see, we've suddenly seen an upsurge of violence from the Israeli side on the Syrian border. Last week we had a number of Iranians killed.
Yes, that was exactly what I was coming to. So, do we now face geopolitical risks in the Middle East? What would your own sense be, Mr. Sood? Iran has said that it will respect the deal if others respect the deal. The quote is running. Iran's statement is that since others are respecting, other signatories are still respecting the deal, they will. Otherwise, they will feel free to continue with uranium enrichment. Obviously, it won't be just uranium enrichment. It will be perhaps even more geopolitical tensions or some military action. Do you think we are going to face some kind of a geopolitical problem as other signatories like EU and China find it difficult to resist US sanctions too much?
See, one of the key problems in terms of the region and the ramifications of the breakdown of the JCPOA is that two key allies of the United States are both very happy that President Trump has pulled out of the deal. That is Saudi Arabia and Israel. And so Saudi Arabia and Iran are locked in a kind of a proxy battle in Yemen, which is bleeding the Saudis considerably. But nonetheless, Saudis are involved in this adventurism in Yemen, and they are determined to take this thing to a conclusion.
Okay.
the Iranians have now engaged with the Saudis in this, and while they have said that they did not want to get into a frontal thing, but given some of the aggressive statements that have come out from the Crown Prince in Saudi Arabia, the Iranians will have no choice but to continue in this path.
Okay.
For Prime Minister Netanyahu in Israel, he considered Hezbollah in Lebanon and the Iranian presence in Syria as an acute security risk. So therefore, you have a peculiar situation where both of US allies are actually egging on Trump. And we have seen greater aggressiveness on the part of Israel. And meanwhile, in Iran also, let's remember that there are different power centers. You have the presidency, which is led by President Rouhani, but you also have the Supreme Leader. And the Supreme Leader has today made a statement where he has said that if the Europeans cannot ensure that the deal will be safeguarded, and all the advantages of the deal will be fully safeguarded, then we should certainly walk out of the deal. So he has taken a much harder line as compared to President Rouhani. And the IRGC, and there are certain other sections which have even said that Iran should now tear up the deal and actually even walk out of the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Okay. So, well, if it is, you therefore think that there can be a huge geopolitical hotspot in the Middle East. Is that right?
Well, there is already a hotspot in the form of the Syrian crisis. But yes, it could become hotter still. Okay.
Well, Mark To, therefore, the final question to you. Do you think we are now, if there were to be any further military problems or even harsh statements coming in either from Iran or Iran and maybe Israel or Saudi Arabia, do you think we are looking at crude, much more expensive than, I'm referring to largely Brent, much more than $80?
Yeah, we should not limit our imagination just because we anchored our previous memory of the past prices. And actually, for this moment, I think 80, as you said before in the last session, I think 80 is very, very likely to be reachable in the coming few quarters.
Right. Okay, actually, we leave it at that. That's going to be a bigger problem for India, that both the fiscal deficit and the current account deficit can be seriously rocked if $80 is what we have to pay for crude. And separately, of course, how we negotiate our deals with Iran and with the rest of the Middle East to purchase crude would be another issue. The crude could get much more expensive if there is a geopolitical problem in the Middle East. But at the moment, even 80 looks like something very much on the cards. Mr. Sood, Mr. Dasgupta and Mark To, thank you very much for joining me in this conversation. Tough times ahead, not just on the economic front, but perhaps also on the diplomatic front for India. Thank you very much for watching this special show on the Iran nuclear deal and its impact on India.